For more on this incident and the future of the Taipan helicopter fleet, I sat down a short time ago with the Shadow Defence Minister, Andrew Hastie. Andrew Hastie, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
It really illustrates, I guess as the Defence Minister said, the dangers of these exercises and of choppers in particular. You've served. Can you take us through how dangerous these exercises typically are and how dangerous the sort of manoeuvres that occur in helicopters are?
Well, the 4 men who were flying on Friday night were from the 6th Aviation Regiment, which is based out of Sydney. They were Special Operations qualified, which means they were trained to fly Special Operations missions. My understanding is that they were flying a Special Operations mission on Friday night. So they were the very best of our pilots. And one of the challenges our soldiers, sailors and airmen have to overcome is that of geography. We are an island nation bounded by the ocean, and so flying over water is something that we have to do. What they were doing, as I understand it, was flying over water by night under night vision, doing a special operations profile, which is very, very challenging, and they were the best in our country. But having done it myself, when you get in the back of one of those helicopters, you entrust your life entirely to the pilots and air crew on board. And these pilots were the very best, as I said, and I've worked with their unit before and I hold them in the highest possible regard.
And why are these exercises so necessary, to go as hardcore and as dangerous as they do?
Because war is exceptionally dangerous, and so you need to push the envelope as far as you can. You need to replicate warlike conditions when you train. There's an old saying, train hard, fight easy. This applies here, and that's why Talisman Save is such an important part of our training plan every year, because we need to make sure that we are very, very sharp and very, very good at what we do.
So when you were at war, the stuff that you experienced in exercises, was it war? Did you find it warlike? Did you find it prepared you for what you had to do adequately?
When you're training in special operations particularly, you're trying to simulate battle conditions. You're trying to simulate the danger, the friction and the uncertainty that is inherent to war. And so it's really important that when you are exercising, that those elements reflect reality in war as much as possible within the risk profile that you're willing to accept. Including
dangerous flying, you'd imagine.
Including dangerous flying, and I've done one of the riskiest flight profiles you can do. This was with US Black Hawks back in 2012 over the Indian Ocean, where 4 abreast we did air-to-air refuel with a C-130 tanker at night under night vision. And at that point you're sitting there thinking, well, if something goes wrong in any one of the helicopters, we'd all go down. But these pilots, as I said, and these air crew, they're the very best, and I was always happy to entrust my life to these men and women, because they work so hard to make sure that they deliver professional excellence every day.
There's been obviously these stories about the Taipan, concerns with it. Peter Dutton was Defence Minister. He was looking to replace them with Black Hawks. In your time as Shadow Defence Minister, has this come across your desk, concerns about these aircraft? Did you have a reaction to the ditching in Jervis Bay in March, for example? Should the government be moving quicker?
Our concerns are well documented, not just the Coalition's concerns, but I think parliamentary concerns about the airframe over the last decade. I don't want to speculate as to what went wrong here, but a decision was taken to go with the Black Hawk into the future, and I think that was a wise and prudent decision, and one that's been well supported by those in aviation within the Defence Force.
Do you think the government and the Defence Department have moved quickly enough on this? I guess there's been a bit of controversy about procurement processes in the department of late.
Look, this is something that's played out over the last decade, and I'm really conscious here that we're working with the government on a bipartisan basis. I think the best interest of the ADF is served long term by Black Hawk, and that's what we'll be moving to. And so for the moment, I know the MRH-90s are grounded, and an investigation will occur, and that's all in the hands of our ADF and the leadership.
But would you favour the Taipan to continue for a time? Do you think that's still okay? Or
I'm just not a subject matter expert on the aircraft.
Yeah.
It ditched in March, obviously. A risk assessment was conducted. It was considered airworthy, and until we uncover what happened here, Defence will act in the best interest of its people.
Now, I wanted to ask you, while I've got you, about the foreign editor of The Australian, Greg Sheridan's writings. He's been highly critical of the government on defence. And are you underwhelmed by the pace of things and how the government has responded to the DSR? Because he certainly is, I guess.
Yeah, Greg gave us a good touch-up in government as well. So I think he's dishing it out fairly to both sides, frankly. But yes, I think the DSR was very underwhelming. Apart from the fact that it was announced on the eve of Anzac Day, there was no new money, there's cost shifting, and there's cannibalisation of capability. Particularly for Army, we're going to see Army going backwards in terms of combat power, with the decision to reduce the infantry fighting vehicle order from 450 to 129 vehicles. And just in the last week, we've seen the government handle the relationship with Germany very poorly. The Prime Minister went to Germany, announced a 100-strong order of the box of vehicles exported out of Queensland to Germany to the tune of $1 billion, and then a week later or so, 2 weeks later, the announcement was made to down-select a South Korean infantry fighting vehicle, and we're told that deal with the Germans is now at risk. So this is poor relationship management from the government.
Richard Marles says we're delivering on our commitments, and the PM said we're sort of changing to more of a maritime perspective on defence. But Greg Sheridan says you can't on the one hand say it's the worst strategic circumstances in our generation and not fund more. And he says Penny Wong has more power in that ERC process than Richard Marles. What do you make of all that?
Well, I think he's right. The government has said that we are facing the most dangerous strategic circumstances since the Second World War. And so having said that, for the last 8 months or so, you'd expect some sort of action. With the DSR, all we got was more reviews and no new money.
So you wanted more money, included in the forward estimates?
Absolutely.
How much?
Well, you've got to remember, inflation is also impacting defence purchasing power. In fact, probably to the tune of 10 to 15%. So, in a sense, there's a cut of up to $1 billion plus in the DSR without new money. And that's a problem. And so what happens is you have to make decisions about which capabilities you invest in and which ones you leave to the wayside. And unfortunately, I think Army is getting hammered here. They're losing combat power. They're going from 3 mechanised battalions to 1. This is going to be a problem for morale long term and, in the end, fighting capability.
Well, what does it mean for our defence, or do they have a point when they say the wars of the future, like it's not going to be defended on land for us?
I think we need to be able to prevail in the close fight and in the deep fight. We need to be able to project force offshore with our submarines, with our aircraft, with our drones. We also need to be able to conduct cyber warfare, but in the end, we need to be able to prevail in the close combat, which means Army has to be able to prevail, and the way you do that is delivering a combined arms effect. Infantry, armoured vehicles, artillery and air support, and without heavy or infantry fighting vehicles, you just can't deliver that combat power to win the close fight.
So polls in your home state of WA show the Liberal Party more competitive, but that didn't appear the case in the seat of Rockingham at the weekend, the state seat, replacing Mark McGowan. What did you make of that result?
Well, I think it's a good result for us, for the Liberal Party. You had a 33% primary swing against the government. You had a 22% two-party preferred swing against the government. And you've got to remember that we also had an independent running, a popular independent running in the field as well. So it's complicated, but what you'd see with that swing replicated in a seat like mine, there's 4 state seats in the seat of Canning. You'd see 3 of those 4 seats return into Liberal hands with a swing like that. So I think you're going to see a lot of nervous backbenchers in this Labor government. There's a lot of mouths to feed for the Premier, Roger Cook, and I anticipate a bit more instability in his government, particularly when the Aboriginal cultural and heritage laws and other problems like the housing and health crisis start to bite.
And that's going to hurt the voice in WA, presumably, isn't it, the controversy over those cultural laws?
Yes, I think it is. It's an attack on property rights, and people are very concerned about what the voice will do. And this is the problem for the Albanese government. They haven't defined the voice, they haven't given detail. And so people's first experience with a change like this is the new laws brought in by the WA state government. And anyone with a block bigger than 1,100 square metres now has to get a permit potentially, if they're going to make changes to their property. And so they're wondering, well, what will the voice do? What impact will it have over their lives?
Andrew Hastie, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.